mendelspod.com, advancing life science research, connecting people and ideas.
Thought leaders in the pharma industry are more and more embracing open collaboration as a major solution to the present industry crisis. Barry Bunin joins us now. He's here to talk about his company, Collaborative Drug Discovery, which provides a platform to help companies share data, but in a secure environment.
Today's show is made possible by SA Depot, the world's largest cloud-based marketplace for research services. With SA Depot, you can easily find the perfect research service provider and manage your project from anywhere in the world.
Welcome to the program, Barry.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Daryl.
What are the features of your platform?
So you hit it on the nose where you talked about collaboration. So philosophically, the idea is that multiple brains can work better than one brain. And we all know this through conversation and ideas. And what's the extension of that within a framework that allows the security for drug discovery? And so I was going to start with just a little anecdote that when I was an undergrad at Columbia, just getting into research, there was a really bright postdoc who said we would have a Nobel Prize if we could have all the ideas of all of our brains in one head. And so it's very much an extension of that type of thinking. Mm-hmm. All right. And so when you mention the collaboration aspect of it, you want to allow people to collaborate with as many other brains as possible while still having the security and privacy to create intellectual property for drug discovery.
And how do you do that?
Well, we have the CDD Vault, and we summarize it in 3 words, which is to archive, mine, and collaborate. So the vault, by definition, as the name suggests, even on a subconscious level, the vault's the secure private space. But then anything in the database can be shared with anyone else selectively and securely. So this could be one experiment. So basically you can allow the economics of efficiency, of specialization between whoever's best in the world at this new idea with this process for advancing a drug and this other process for a counter screen.
Okay, so when your customers come onto the site, what do they see? I mean, what do you sort of physically have?
So when you log in, we've put a lot of effort into making it really simple landing page, much like you would see in LinkedIn or Facebook, where it's idiot-proof, intuitive to find, say, all your molecules and all your biodata. So when you log in, you just have your frame of reference. And you don't have to worry about all the collaboration is sort of in the back, pulling in the data sets that you have permission to view. Okay,
so there's permissions. It's sort of like a Google+.
It's like the analogy that I use 2 or 3 analogies. In the collaboration space, people have heard of like SharePoint or Dropbox or Box.net. So that's one capability for internet-based secure collaboration. And then there's other ones that are specific to our domain of drug discovery. So we've handled both of those 2 problems, if you will, of handling all the data to advance a drug, up towards the clinic, and all the security and collaboration. The other analogy I use sometimes when talking to people who don't know the domain so well, a very popular software is called Salesforce, and salespeople use that to advance their customer prospects, they call them, or suspects or prospects to customers. And I say this is similar, but instead of customers, we're advancing drug prospects to drug candidates.
Mm-hmm. Now the data that's there, do you curate any data? Or is it just what your customers bring in?
My last company was actually a curation company, Libraria, and it built up the first gene family-wide SAR database and combinatorial reaction databases. And I didn't want to do that because you have a never-ending overhead of curating that fire hose of increasing information. So I decided this time I wanted to do a one-time thing that could scale. So what we did is we made the software, and anybody in the world can use it to share data with anyone else, either securely, privately, or publicly. So the vast majority, 80-90% is all in private collaborations, but there is this subset, and now it's over 100 data sets, million data points and such, and those include things like the known drugs that might be of interest to everyone, or a lot of neglected disease data. We were the first to open up work with GlaxoSmithKline to open up their malaria data from the open lab in Tres Cantos, Spain. It's also on PubChem and Kimball.
So in that instance, they would have put the data on the site and shared it with the public.
Exactly, and that fits with our business model. So anyone who makes data public can use it for free, and we even help to organize it and make it look pretty and give attribution. And then the business model part of it is if you want privacy, then that's the subscription.
Okay, you want to load it on and keep it private,
and
then selectively choose who you're going to share it with.
Mm-hmm. And that's what most folks do, and you can. They're not mutually exclusive. Some data can be public, others can be private. There's a lot of control. The default is private, obviously.
Yeah, the obvious question is, why hasn't this been done before?
It's very hard. I think I mentioned you when we were talking earlier about 8 years of hard work and then overnight success. So,
what was so difficult?
The difficulty is that you have to handle a lot of complexity very simply. And so there's a lot of complexity in science, right? There's all these different experiments, there's nuance, there's detail, and so that's hard problem number one. And hard problem number two is making it within people's natural workflows easy to share or collaborate. So for example, no one wants to have to upload the same data 4 or 5 times if they're working with 4 or 5 people. And so that was actually very hard. From a database perspective, I don't think there's anyone doing it like this. So each object is in one or more projects, and those can be shared with one or more groups. And that's actually a very different sort of model. And so the data everyone has, they're like, biologists will have Excel files or things, TXT files coming off of their instruments. So that data, to be useful, you have to be able to search it by chemical substructure or potency selectivity or potency toxicity to avoid a future Vioxx problem if you can up front. And so you have to get all the scientific data right. The math has to be right, the chemistry has to be right. And you have to also make it easy for the way people really collaborate. And some collaborations are pretty complex. We work with NIH Neuroscience Blueprint, where there's a large number of academics and CROs, and everyone has their own way of doing their science and data.
This seems actually like the perfect platform for the NIH.
I think we're very aligned with anyone like the NIH that wants to advance a whole field. So if you think about it from like taxpayer, government, political perspective, the NIH wants to show results, and they don't really care if it comes from University of Georgia or UCLA, as long as a new treatment for Alzheimer's or whatever gets advanced fast. So we're very aligned with NIH. Gates Foundation is another one. We've done a number of projects for tuberculosis where they win if anyone wins. I think the quote from Bill Gates was, if your mom has cancer, you don't care if the cancer drug's discovered in China or the US. You just want the cancer drug. That's a quote from Bill Gates, actually.
That works well for you. So what I wonder is someone going to develop this as a nonprofit? I mean, it kind of sounds in that direction.
I think actually it's interesting because I've thought about this a lot in terms of there's sort of a double bottom line to this company. There's a for-profit making money aspect, but there's a total, doing as much good for as many projects and as possible. And I think there's actually a much greater virtue to roughing it out and making it as a real company, because then you have this ongoing engine of creation. And so I found a little bit of an oasis where you can do this humanitarian innovation for neglected disease and commercial innovation, and they're not at conflict with each other. So it actually can do both. And as a business, we can apply for, there's certain grants that we can get to fund the more doing good side of it, and it's just each reinforces each other if you set it up as a virtuous cycle. It's sort of interesting.
So we've had several thought leaders on the program, including Bernard Munoz recently, saying that this open collaboration is the way forward for drug discovery and for pharma. But is the industry really doing it?
Well, it's one of the root causes of the challenge that you hear pretty much everywhere now about the economic hardship of making the drug discovery business work. And so I like it because it's a root problem. One of the root problems are that you'll have like one company develop an HIV protease AIDS drug, and then half a dozen others get similar ones shortly thereafter. And you have to think about what's maximally efficient for the field. Is pure competition the best, or are there some places where you can compete and other places, leverage each other's results better? So this breakthrough allows the economics of specialization, or what everyone's doing, and it allows things to happen at sort of closer to the speed of the internet on Facebook or LinkedIn than the traditional drug discovery process. So it's so your question was how much is it happening? So it definitely, as with any company in a new marketplace, there's a beachhead where you start and grow from. And our beachhead has interestingly been the most money pressured organization. So like a VC funded startup that has to do well on their Series A to win their Series B, they use us as their whole solution for all their internal data. Or academic group where they only have one shot on goal, we'll handle all their data. And now it's extending to, we've passed multiple big pharma audits. We work on a lot of the outskirts where a big pharma might work with someone else for the chemistry and they have the biology, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so we're slowly getting to the mainstream market that way.
And more big pharma does seem to be collaborating.
It's what do they say? Necessity's the mother of invention. So they have to. And the model that I've heard is like the Hollywood studios, where there'll be some creative little groups doing some innovative, talent-driven thing, but they're not able to take it to market. And so pharma's been slowly moving in that direction. And there's arguments that the pressure of the money for the more cash-tight companies, and just the fact that something has to be a little bit better than what you have for you to take it versus what you put your own thing into. So as the world becomes more specialized and bigger, it's very natural that they have to collaborate more to stay competitive.
Will you give us an example or two of your customers using the site?
Yeah, we actually have CDD spotlights, and we split it up halfway between industry and academic for both. So our first was with Jim McCarrow, who actually introduced me to the Gates Foundation. He works on African sleeping sickness and Chagas disease. He's an MD, but also a PhD, and he's sort of at UCSF has all the pieces via collaboration of a drug discovery program. So they're working on a Chagas compound, which actually the lead last time I looked was a compound synthesized by Eris Axis, where I was working as a chemist, now Celera. So there's definitely an industry academic aspect. I did another spotlight with Jim Weichel, who's at Apex, and this is a relatively small company, but he had risen through the ranks to the head of computational chemistry at Lilly without a PhD, from the coal mines of West Virginia. So we sort of seek out these sort of different sort of people as our early adopters. And I guess the other ones, let me think of the other ones. Another good example that's been announced is MM4TB collaboration. So this is 25 different groups, including 2 big pharmas, Sanofi, Aventis, AstraZeneca, all working with Stuart Cole as the figurehead, who sequenced TB. And so all these 25 organizations, even with the business rules of the most IP-sensitive big pharmas, are working together in one vault.
What's the biggest objection customers have to putting their data on, to using the site? What do you have to overcome with them?
Yeah, you have to convince them it's secure, right? So 8 years ago, when I was starting this, before everyone had heard of the cloud, it was like, what, are you crazy? No one's going to do this. And now it's the model to vogue, because it's less expensive for customers and less expensive for the vendor. So you have to explain to folks that the CTD vault is secure. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot easier now than it was when we started. So we have 28,000 logins in the past year. We've been doing this for 8 years with 100% perfect security record. And then if folks want, beyond just the, don't make me think it's secure, okay.
How do you convince them it's secure?
It depends how far they want to go. So we have levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we start with, there's a secure login and password, much like people are used to with bank accounts, for example. There are projects within vaults is the second level of security that they can decide if someone's. The interesting thing about this level of security is if someone's not in a project, not only do they not see the data, but they're not even aware that project exists. So it's just blissfully unaware. So that's level 2. Level 3, if you want, is we have 2-factor authentication, where in addition to logging in, you can get basically a phone call to your cell phone, so you have to both know the password and log in. You can restrict IP addresses, and our website talks, we kind of turned it on its head, so we talk about your security advantage. This isn't just nebulously everywhere, it's at a professional co-location facility with concrete walls. I can't even go in, and I'm the CEO and founder. So you need a photo ID and all that.
Is there an intrinsic or natural conflict between collaboration and security?
No, I don't think there's an intrinsic conflict. There's a challenge, and there's a balance. So I would say the more that you give people comfort that they're in control, they have the power, then the more they're willing to and naturally will collaborate. I think the reason that's true is because everyone thinks it's all about permissions, but a lot of times people are already working with each other, or they have agreements in place. They're just not doing it where when you patent, you share information. It's just not done in a way that's to the second shared the way CDD does it.
True,
So,
when you publish a patent, even at the application point, it's made public.
exactly, it's a public disclosure. So all this, sensitivity about sharing. I was at a roundtable with Francis Collins and the heads of industry, where they were talking about drug repositioning and drug repurposing. So maybe you've put a lot of money and after phase 2 decide not to go forward even though it's not toxic. That might be great for a rare neglected disease. And so it'd be great if there was a way with limited liability to the pharmas to pursue those sorts of avenues. And this was a publicly disclosed meeting and everything. So the interesting thing about it is, I think it was one of the big pharmas, they said, we looked at it and 90% of the information already was out there. It had been disclosed in a meeting or something, or on clinicaltrials.gov or something like that. They just haven't really put it into a database format. So it's almost like a myth of there is IP and there's places where people have leverage and they need information to be secure, but we allow people to keep data secure and share it with whoever they want with temporal control, spatial control by project or data type. And so I think if you look at how efficient the world could be, it's a lot more than what is currently being done. And so anyway, getting back to the main point, it's not just about who you share information with, but getting the data easily into a database format so that it can be reused is actually an equally hard problem. So we have a lot of technologies that automate the batch uploading of data from Excel files that people have. You wouldn't think that's a problem, but you can't search across 10,000 Excel files by chemical substructure or potency selectivity. So we've developed intelligent algorithms that'll 90% of the time and learn from your data where to put it. And once you do it once, the same song, third, fourth verse, when you're doing it over a course of years, you may do hundreds of experiments. We automate all that.
So you just mentioned talking about agreements between different parties. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, this collaborative leap forward requires innovative agreements. And we're seeing them between pharma and universities, ways of getting researchers to share earlier for some kind of IP trade-off, or, new agreements even between competitors, So
Yes.
do you get involved in those agreements at all, or are they worked out here and then they use you?
Yeah. A question which I've thought too much about. So I've thought about what's lowest common denominator, because a lot of times with these agreements the wheel gets reinvented, and if lawyers are charging per hour, maybe they like that. You can just rack up the bills. But a lot of times at a fundamental level it's the same sort of thing that you're negotiating, the rights to a therapeutic area or a geography or a material transfer agreement. They're all at a meta level the same. But to your question, so I've worked with Creative Commons and Science Commons on what templates would look like to automate and streamline this system, and I know it's possible. And because it's a lot of work just to handle the data side, I've chosen to punt on the legal business side, and that works out just fine. But I have ideas for how we could streamline it, because you can share the chemical
By
data.
streamline, come up with some kind of basic agreement that would work.
In 95% of the cases, say, or 90, I don't know how many percent of the cases. I mean, it certainly is the case that a lot of times the nuance of these agreements are less important than the inertia of just getting them in place. So, but So we can handle the data for the composition of matter, we can handle the data for the utility patents, the biodata. What I've found happens in practice, you have sort of two use cases. You have cases where people have already negotiated the IP and the agreement, and then they're collaborating using CDD on the data side. That's case A. Case B, which is actually pretty common, is there's no IP agreement in place. People are just starting to work with each other. They talk at a bar and they start doing experiments, and then wait till you find something that's worth, doing international patents.
Yeah, just kind of trust the system and go with it.
Wait till you find something worth patenting.
Let's talk about the industry in general. What's your vision for where it's going? I mean, do you think that's where it's going, where agreements are not as important, it's just open?
No, I think because of patent law, you still need agreements and protection, and I think that's true in any area with commercial potential, because that's where the margins are on a drug. I think for areas of neglected disease where it's more important to save lives, and just the drug itself is going to have to be subsidized by someone, not just for making it, but for transportation and freezing or whatever. In those areas, it would be very nice to see people move towards things being just as efficient as it humanly can be possible. And that's, you may say that's a utopian ideal, but and we do find that there's areas of neglected disease where people aren't that collaborative. They're still competing for grants. We're competing for grants, so I understand it. But I think that when there's no money to be made, no obvious financial gain to be made, you could have the real increase in productivity by not worrying about that so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, you talked about the best can work with the best, and right, jointly you could be the Nobel winner. Is that idealistic?
It's not just that the best can work with the best on the people side, but software can help change the paradigm. So let's say it can not just be the best brains with the best brains, but the right brains or the right algorithms with the right brains. So it really can matter. Let's just take an example, a hypothetical example, but let's say there's a certain target for cancer, let's say, and it requires a certain type of compounds. And it could be that these types of compounds that hit this target are made by a chemist in one country and a biologist has the assay in another country. And there's a third person who's a computational scientist who makes that connection. And just the software that they're using to optimize and view things, it can evolve not just a function of having the best brains together, but the best way of looking at the data. So software can actually change the economics in addition to the people.
So what does the industry look like in 10 years?
Well, you've actually been in your interviews sort of foreshadowing it, not just with this interview, but with Assay Depot, and they're sort of disintermediating the services between different groups to work with each other, and we're doing it on the IP side, is a way to think of it, and the data side.
Okay, so they're sort of the service side. You're providing the platform for the data.
The data between whoever invents it, say an academic and a CRO, whoever can turn the crank fastest on the assays or the synthesis. So in the future, so the one missing piece, and this is the key to it all, is the money. So you can imagine, taking all of the data and IP and making that into bits, if you will, and the speed of the internet. And the same thing, services, you have to do the work, but the information of the services can be computerized. So what's the missing piece there for the money? I'm not going to give the answer in the interview, but I think we figured it out.
So you began in 2004. Have there been any big changes with the platform, or has your platform and model stayed pretty much the same?
It started as a spin out of Eli Lilly, where I was an entrepreneur in residence 2003, 2004. Actually founded on April Fool's Day in 2004, so we just had our 8-year anniversary. The probably, let me think. So the biggest change has been on the collaborative side, making it something that people actually would use and adopt. And it sounds simple, but it's actually quite a hard thing to do.
So getting feedback from them.
Yeah, we do things called contextual inquiries and user testing. These are well-established methods of sort of understanding what people want better than what they think themselves. So they might tell you, I want this button to be red, or they'll tell you something. But what you need to do, it's like the 5 whys Toyota uses to get rid of a underlying problem in manufacturing. They do that whenever there's a problem in the car. They'll ask and ask and ask. And so we use a similar approach where we try and really understand what's the root cause of this problem. And when we do that, and when we do that for enough people, then when we come up with a solution, it actually works for a lot of people. And it's interesting because it's a well-established process for building software, but you can imagine using the same process for anything, for drug discovery, etc.
I love asking this question. We've asked it of gene synthesis companies or gene sequencing, the new sequencing platforms coming up. Is IT, are the people in IT taking over bio?
I think you need both IT and the experimental scientist. It is an information science at its core level. At the end of the day, you have some piece of information, and that's what the value is.
And people like you were able to do something with that.
Right. And so taking over sounds a little hostile. I would say more you just want to use the right tool and the right brains for the right problem. And sometimes you need this expertise, and sometimes you need that expertise, like a sous chef or a dessert chef.
But I mean, you come from the biology and the chemistry side.
Initially, yeah.
Initially, but you've probably learned a lot of IT and maybe even programming.
So back when the internet was started, I did a little HTML to get the website. I got combinatorial in 94 or so. I'm definitely no developer. Our developers would code circles around me. I wouldn't even try.
Yeah, you let them.
Yeah, and actually they probably appreciate it because I can't tell them what to do because they know better than I do. But to answer your question, I've definitely picked up things. So when I started my first company, I wrote a book on combinatorial chemistry coming out of John Ellman's group and that field, which is a very experimental field. And that was a field which I really, really knew well. And so I felt comfortable working in that field. And I felt like going into a new field, I wanted to learn it. So between companies, I wrote my second book on chemoinformatics. So I tried to do a very non-marketing evaluation of the technical capabilities of all the products on the marketplace, so I'd know where the Achilles heel is to attack it and come up with something new and better. So that was sort of my way of training myself, sort of like writing a review of the field.
So let's talk about you more personally. You did work with John Ellman, like you just mentioned. What did you work on with him?
So we took the idea of diversity from your body's immune system in antibodies, and we applied that to small molecules. So it was the first papers for the field of combinatorial chemistry, going from peptide libraries to, in our case, benzodiazepines, analogs of Valium. So my PhD was to make 10,000 analogs of Valium, and then at the same time, that's sort of the hand in the glove for high throughput screening. So there was tremendous investment in the space. A lot of companies went IPO, like Arcule and Affymax. We discussed Affymetrix. Gene Chip was a spin out of Affymax. So there's definitely a lot of innovation, and like any field, it got overhyped and then underappreciated, and then people figure out how to use it just right. And so today, pretty much any chemist should be thinking intelligently about whether they can make 10 molecules or 1 molecule in the same amount of effort.
So you were John Ellman's first grad student at his lab in Berkeley. So how was that?
Well, so usually when you're interviewing with professors, they have all their slides and their fancy offices. So he was a postdoc in Pete Schultz's lab, and I was interviewing him while he was injecting HPLC samples. But he, in spite of his sort of blue-collar nature there, he had the best ideas of anyone I spoke to. And the question I asked him, which I think you asked me, is why hasn't anyone done this before? And he told me it's an idea whose time has come. And it was very exciting. I was working on this project, and then I took off to go backpacking in Europe. I went to the Olympics in Barcelona, and I remember writing him postcards like I was excited to get back to the research, even though I was hanging out in the youth hostels and doing that sort of thing.
At one point in your studies, you had to make a decision between Eastern religion and chemistry.
Right.
So why chemistry?
Interesting. So yeah, I was taking... Actually, it's an interesting story because I actually have an education background. So the thing that got me started on chemistry was in high school. They did this great thing. I think every high school should do this, where they allowed the student to teach the class. And I was pretty good in chemistry in high school, and so I went and taught the class. And at the beginning, the kids were throwing paper and misbehaving, but I explained to them the difference between a triple bond and a double bond, and they learned it. And I was like, this is fun. You can turn on other brains and get them to see new things, and that's sort of always been an extension throughout the work that I've done. So you could think of CDD as sort of a creativity engine of brains turning on other brains to new ideas. But just going to answer your question,
quite a bit of education too.
But going to the question about the education. So in college, I thought I was going to become a high school chemistry teacher. That was my first love, and I actually student taught high school chemistry up in Harlem. I would bike to Philip Randolph High School and back. And what happened to me there, I also got interested in philosophy, or just like any college student does. I took some Eastern religion course at Barnard, and I thought of writing a comparative religion, taking all the themes of life and seeing how each religion deals with it differently. I thought would be interesting and fun, and a little bit like I sampled every bit of CombiChem or chemoinformatics. It's just what's reality there, and understanding that would have been fun. But my dad is a doctor, and of course as a chemistry major you have all the pre-meds there. My grandpa, my dad, my uncle, my brother, they're all doctors, MDs. So at the time he said, for your life and your career, you can't have like a mass spec in your backyard, but you could write poetry in your spare time or books in your spare time. So do the thing that's going to work for your career, and then the other becomes your hobby, was his advice to me.
So have you kept that up?
Well, I've kept up. So fast forwarding, so the thing that got me out of focusing on education was the excitement of doing something new. It's sort of what turns on an artist, is that you get to do something new and different. So I made a new molecule when I was an undergraduate, which I called it the Berry compound, and then you get to school way. But basically it was a compound which had a radical on one part of the molecule and a diazo, a nitrogen, which we would hit with a laser, and you could make a carbene and a radical to look at the spin polarization transfer. And I thought that was cool. I'd made a new molecule. No one else had done this before. And so that innovation aspect, that novelty aspect, that's like, okay, I can do something that, that's new and different. And that was exciting to me. So, but I've still always been interested in the education aspect. So that's kind of why I've written the books, and with the company, it's as much as I guess the main point I want to leave folks with about collaborative drug discovery is it's not just about how much we can make the company a success, which is interesting, but it's how much of a multiplier effect we can have on others that at the end of the day is going to be what really matters.
Thank you for joining us. It's been fun.
Thanks, Errol.
Barry Bunin is the CEO of Collaborative Drug Discovery.
Today's show is made possible by SA Depot, the world's largest cloud-based marketplace for research services. With SA Depot, you can easily find the perfect research service provider and manage your project from anywhere in the world.
We have this thing with a web-based platform in the internet. It's actually a piece of art. The software is a piece of art. And if you go down at the release notes, you can look, it's like a gallery of images, but coming up with...
You mean the code? You mean...
I mean, it's a piece of art.
You mean the internet itself?
Well, the internet's a piece of art too. That comes up from like an ant colony from everybody's combined creative work. But every website is a piece of art. Right? And it's actually a very minimalistic piece of art. It has to fit in this little space, and there's certain rules and such, and some are going to resonate better with art critics or the mass humanity, and some will resonate less.